This was a book I read when you were stuck in Moscow. I was stuck in my little apartment and read this remarkable book called Journey for Our Time. And this is, it is a travelogue and a commentary by a, mid-level, I don't know if he was mid-level or not, aristocrat in France. I mean, they have, and I don't know much about aristocracies, but they've got some talls, and they've got some grandes, and they've got some ventis, And I think he was between a tall and a grande,
Well, as I point out, as a Bostonian, I don't drink Starbucks. I'm a Dunkin' guy.
You're a Dunkin' guy.
Small, medium, large, and extra large.
Well, he was between a small and a medium, I think, as an aristocrat, but a brilliant intellectual. And this was a trip he took back in 1838, 39, and wrote this in 1840. And I was just startled by how similar things sounded. And so what I'd like to explore with you now is this Putin? Is this Russia? Did Russia make Putin? Did Putin warp Russia? And just kind of go through a few things. So towards the end of the book, he writes, he says, Russia sees Europe as a prey which our dissensions will sooner or later deliver up to her. She foments anarchy among us in the hope of profiting by a corruption she promotes because it is favorable to her views. Let's see, he goes on. For many years, Paris read revolutionary papers, revolutionary in every sense, paid for by Russia. Europe, they say in Petersburg, is taking the line that Poland followed. She will enervate herself through vain liberalism, which we remain powerfully precise, while we remain powerful precisely because we are not free. Let us be patient under the yoke. We will make others pay for our shame. This sounds an awful lot like Putin today.
Yeah.
But this is 180 years earlier.
Yeah.
Is this Russia?
Well, I mean, first of all, my first reaction is it sounds at approximately the same time, Tocqueville in the United States, right, with a different perspective on a different country. But this is shot through Russian history. I mean, if you could change the lingo, right, you'd say the same thing about the Soviet Union, about the West and the decadent, with the dialectic that they expected for Western capitalism to collapse. But what interests me, John, about this is the obsession, the focus on the West. And maybe if I turn this a little bit, because Putin is now, with all those criticisms that you've just read from almost 2 centuries ago, very similar view from Putin now. His reaction, though, is because of the U.S. and our vassals' war against Russia, he wants to reorient Russia east and south. Mm-hmm. And that's not the Russian perspective. I mean, it's from Peter the Great through to the present day. I've yet to meet a wealthy Russian who said to me, my lifelong desire is a townhouse in Shanghai. Mm-hmm. Or a flat in Beijing. Oh, they want to go to London, West Palm Beach, Park Avenue, Beverly Hills. It's Western. It's not Eastern.
It's been this,
But Putin himself plays on this, right? He likes to say to visiting leaders, particularly from the West, you look at me and you think I'm like you, but I'm not. I've also got this Eastern heritage. I'm a different kind of cat. Mm-hmm. I'm a Eurasian. I'm different. So he's trying to, with his engagement with the PRC, with Iran, both because of necessity, but also because of their shared views on what, and it's a phrase I don't like, the rules-based international order, which is the talking point that I would be drafted by public affairs that I'd have to use. But our system, what we've developed, after the Second World War, he and Xi And the mullahs in Tehran are looking to smash that and are making some progress in it. But his relationship with Xi is problematic, and problematic for Russians, and Russians recognize this. I'm sure Putin does as well. A Russian once said to me, you know, Putin sitting at a table with Xi or sitting at a dinner table with Xi, he looks at Xi and sees an ally, somebody who's going to support him, give him weapons and so forth. And what does Xi see when he looks across the table at Putin? A peasant who sells him gas.
Do you think
Russians don't like that.
Do you think that? How do you think Russians feel about that? I mean, it must bother them deeply that they've become so dependent economically on China.
Yeah, well, and militarily. I mean, we've seen more statements by, Deputy Secretary Campbell, Jake Sullivan, providing more detail on the support that the PRC is providing to Russia, and of course the Russian relationship with Tehran, and we can't forget what President Trump called Little Rocket Man in Pyongyang. Yeah. I used to call them, when I was Deputy Secretary, the crinks: China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. So Putin's going to have to do what he's got to do. I mean, Stalin during the war was ultimately relying on the West, Lend-Lease, the United States, but ultimately in his appeals to the Russian people, in their righteous anger to resist the Nazi invaders from the West, calls upon their religious heritage, which is anathema to any communist. But, you know, in the state of war like that, a leader, whether it's Stalin or Putin, has got to do what he's got to do, and Putin is going to.
He's doing what he's got to do.
He will never compromise. There is no negotiation with him over Ukraine. They've said this. The territory that they've conquered in Ukraine is not up for negotiation. And you know what's interesting, John? And this happened just as just after I'd arrived as ambassador. The Russians amended their constitution, and we focused on the amendment to the term limits provision, which everyone focused on, which allowed Putin to serve 2 more 6-year terms, and he was reelected in March. But there was a provision that I noted at the time, and I noted back to Washington, a provision in the Constitution that made it unconstitutional for any Russian leader, the Russian government, to alienate, to give to another country any portion of Russia's territory. Putin claims 4 oblasts in Ukraine are now Russian territory. And it's unconstitutional for him to give any of that territory back to Ukraine.
I want to come back to this.
By the way, I used to tease my Russian interlocutors about this. I said, well, gee, I'm glad Secretary Seward didn't confront that position when we took Alaska off your hands. Thanks for that, by the way, guys. They didn't like me very much.
I want to come back